The gentleman that joins us now has been good at a lot of things, whether it's been pitching, broadcasting, running the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame as the president and CEO. Of course,
Right.
they've had a big day today with announcing their class of 2020 in these very unusual times that we find ourselves in, unable to do some of the things we normally do. Still doing it well is our good and great friend Jumbo, Ronnie Rantz. Ronnie, hey, listen, good to have you with us. Appreciate you joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Kenny.
It's my pleasure. Well, first and foremost, how are you making out in these unusual times? I mean, how difficult has it been for you? What kind of adjustments have you had to make from your broadcasting entities as well as from the Hall of Fame's perspective?
Well, obviously, nobody wants to hear me play poor mouth for the next few minutes, but it's been tough like everybody. Obviously, Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, we survive on putting events and opening the doors and having different events around the state to obviously promote the Hall of Famers, to earn money, to keep the museum open and to improve it each and every year. And so obviously we haven't been able to do that. We've been postponing. Right around the corner, October 18th and 19th, we've got a golf tournament, a 2-day event at LaBerge Casino in Baton Rouge and the University Club Golf Course. And our fingers are crossed we'll be able to pull that off, and I think we will. We postponed our Hall of Fame induction weekend, which is always the last weekend in June, a 3-day event, chock full of activities. That's been postponed to the middle of December up in Natchitoches. So we just hope that we can get everything in the fiscal year 2020 and keep moving along. And we're looking forward to, 2 great classes to really honor in a 7-month period, which has never been done before.
Right. I'm going to let Michael ask about the class and talk about it in a moment. But with regard to the museum in Natchitoches, I've been there. And for those that haven't been, it's a terrific treat. It is a walk down the history of Louisiana sports, and it covers and encompasses every aspect of sports, every corner of the state. But even when we talk about the class tonight, we'll even talk about fishing. That's what makes it special, is that it really hits on everything, Ronnie.
Yeah, it does. It's open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it's a lot of fun. It's a beautiful building right on the banks of the Cane River in Natchitoches, and only about a 2.5-hour drive from Baton Rouge. So definitely, if you're up that way, and hey, in November, December, the Christmas lights are going on in Natchitoches, and there's no better place in the state of Louisiana to go spend an evening than up in Natchitoches during the Christmas festival time.
And I've been there then, and I've done it then, and it's awesome. Just watch where you're walking.
Watch where you walk.
True story. And then I'll let Michael talk. I was walking.
I thought I wasn't going to say it.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, that's what happened to me. My wife and I went there, spent time at Christmas. We were going to spend 3 days, and on the second day, I'm walking down the street to go eat at a restaurant I'm sure you've been to a bunch of times, and I'm so mesmerized by the lights on the Cane River that I'm just staring with my eyes wide open. And there comes a curb, and you can just guess the rest of the story. I missed the curb, nothing to do with Natchitoches, mind you. Went down and tore my quad tendon in the process. By the way, I managed to somehow, after being on the ground for 10 minutes, get up and walk back to Chateau Saint Denis, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And how I did that to this day is a mystery to my doctor, my surgeon, not my wife. She thought I was nuts. And then I ended up in emergency, of course, that night. But having said that, it's beautiful. The museum's fantastic. I'm going back, facing those demons, and I'm ready to do it. No pun intended when I said demons, by the way. I just thought I'd throw that in there, right?
Well, hope to have you come see us December 15th through 17th. Is when we're going to have the Hall of Fame induction this year for the 2020 class. And it's actually going to be during the Christmas festival, which is the first time that's ever happened. So hope you can come up there, Kenny, and this time you don't get hurt.
There you go. Michael?
Hey, Kenny, maybe we'll get Linda and we'll go up there together because you need somebody to take care of you just in case anyway, man.
That's in all likelihood true.
I like that. Hey, Ronnie, Kenny said, hey, we're going to have a good trip. He can be gone a couple of days. And I heard from him the next day. I said, you having a good time? And he's telling me Denise has him thrown in the back of the car and he's blown his knee out. So, he's going to need some help. But he played hurt and he's a champ. So maybe he'll get in the class one day. Hey, Ronnie, what an impressive class of people here. I'm familiar with the museum, but when you realize coming from Louisiana, when you realize you got Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame, gold medal winners, and NBA champions and things like that. But you covered the gamut this time. I mean, there's Colston, Abdul-Rauf, Dorsey, Weeks, Henry. These are names already ingrained in Louisiana's mindset. And when you do that, do you look for maybe one from each thing, or do you just kind of call the list as it comes? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, people always ask, how do you get into the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame? And minimally, you have to have, just to qualify, just to even be in the conversation, you have to have played 2 years high school in Louisiana, or 2 years college, or 5 years professional. So that's where, like, Peyton Manning last year got inducted because he played all 4 years high school in Louisiana. Drew Brees will be in one day because he played 5 years or more. Marques Colston's going in this coming year. He played 5 years or more. And then somebody like Shaquille O'Neal's in because they did 3 years of college at LSU. Right. And so that's what you have to do to minimally qualify. This past year we had over 150 people nominated in over 20 different sports categories, which is incredible. And we only picked
hit some of those names real quick. Other than Colston, hit some other names.
Other names, people like in baseball, guys like Paul Byrd, pitched 14 years in the major league. Ben Sheets, Olympic gold medalist, and Ben Sheets already in, but somebody like Paul Byrd is on the list, who I think is going to get in one day. B.J. Ryan. Those are just some of the baseball players, and then you got to talk about football players. You got guys that on the Veterans Committee list, that have played back in the day. Ken. Holy Cross, great, who got inducted into the New Orleans Sports Hall of Fame last year. Help me with
Billy
the name.
Truex. Billy Truex.
He's a guy that got a lot of consideration that could easily be in the Louisiana. Warren Capone is not in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, one of the greatest linebackers ever to play at LSU. So it's very, very difficult. There are tremendous players that deserve to be in from various sports, coaches that deserve to be in from various sports, and they hopefully will get their due one day. But when you can only pick 8 a year, it gets very competitive every August when those 35 to 40 people get into a room, and it's kind of like selecting a pope. The smoke comes up at the end, and you got your list. But in between, there's a lot of heavy discussion that goes on.
Visiting with Ronnie Rantz and talking about the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, the induction class mentioned today. Just to go over the names real quickly, Marques Colston was mentioned. Of course, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Glenn Dorsey, Rickie Weeks, along with Courtney Blades-Rogers and Mackie Freeze. Bo Dowden, also part of the class as well. And when you're talking about some of these names, Ronnie, they will strike immediate understanding with the audience, and yet others would ask questions about. So tell us who they are. Look, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf was as good a college scorer as there was in my lifetime outside of Pete Maravich. Glenn Dorsey was an incredibly dominant player from the Baton Rouge area who was just a great player on a national championship team and then played in the NFL. Of course, Rickie Weeks, terrific player at Southern, good major leaguer also. Marques Colston, of course, I'll tell you, you'll enjoy him immensely. We had inducted him into the Saints Hall of Fame last year, just a class act if there ever was one. And Pat Henry, didn't mention. I was saving Pat for last because Pat, national championships at LSU, phenomenal track and field coach. I think everybody knows them, but talk about Courtney Blades-Rogers along with Mackie Freeze and Bo Dowden, because people probably aren't as aware of who they are.
Well, Courtney Blades-Rogers, she literally holds the record for most strikeouts in the history of softball in college. She's from Bel Air High School in New Orleans, in Baton Rouge, and played at Nicholls and also played at Southern Miss. And she's as good of a college softball pitcher as there ever was. And so, anytime I tell people all the time, whenever it's a name like a Bo Dowden, who won the Bassmaster Classic in 1980 and was a professional bass fisherman from the Natchitoches area, actually, for over 20 years. When you're on a fringe sport, when you're not football, baseball, basketball, you have to be the best to ever do it in the state of Louisiana, or the best to ever do it nationally. And so, when you talk about some of these people like Courtney Blades-Rogers, she's literally arguably one of the best college pitchers ever to live in the United States, and she's from Baton Rouge. You mentioned Mackie Freeze. He's still alive, 93 years old. He's actually going to get inducted this December. We're going to put him in the class this year. As Mackie was like, hey, when you're 93, you don't wait till somebody gives you the opportunity to get in early. So he's going to go in along with Pat Henry, actually. They're both going to go in December because Pat's got some potential conflicts next year with USA Track and Field. It's an Olympic year, so he wants to go ahead and just take advantage of the opportunity and go in this December. But Mackie Freeze was a guy who was a great two-sport athlete at Grambling, back when Grambling had tremendous athletes in the 50s, and he was undefeated one year as a pitcher in baseball. And then he, as a high school coach in the Monroe area, had an over 800 winning percentage during the day back in the 70s. And so legendary high school coach, legendary athlete, a two-sport star at Grambling, and a guy who has been on the veterans list and kind of been getting a lot of buzz for the last few years. And it was I'm glad we were able to get him in while he's alive and able to enjoy, some people like Doug Williams and Willis Reed and others that have reached out to him all day long to congratulate him.
What a great story. I mean, unbeaten for his career there. And to connect him, I was reading what you guys sent out today, and to have his name in the same sentence with Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson, I mean, you're in great company. I mean, that's amazing. What names?
It really surprised me. Every year, like last year, for example, Peyton Manning was the headliner of the class, but yet there was a guy named TBarry Porter, who was 92 years old. He was a rodeo champion in the 50s and 60s, even 40s, 50s, and 60s. And he was my favorite character. And the guy was such a joy to be around. And by the end of the 3-day festivities, I think T-Barry won the hearts of everybody who was there, even though you had Les Miles and Peyton Manning in the building, getting honored. And so that's how it is every year. You go in there. I'm personally Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf was my favorite player growing up. And, watched him many, many times in high school, and
wow.
I'm excited to see him. But at the same time, I'm sure we'll come away with, being around Mackie Freeze will probably end up being the highlight.
I love it.
Visiting with Ronnie Rantz, talking about the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, and again, so many great people that are part of this. If you have the chance to go there, you'll get to see the unbelievable list, and you can spend a lot of time in the museum in the process. And, of course, the Louisiana sports writers, big part of this to help make it happen. Doug Ireland has done an outstanding job over an extended period of time. Real pro and a really good guy.
Over 30 years, Doug Ireland has carried the torch, and couldn't do it without him. And he looks forward and works all year round. Now that he's retired at Northwestern State, he's been very much more involved with the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame than ever before from a year-round basis. And, Doug's the mayor of Natchitoches. You couldn't do it without him.
No doubt. Hey, Ronnie, baseball, of course, with what happened with the pandemic, didn't get to see what could have happened in college baseball. There were some questions about LSU's offense. I thought their pitching had a chance to be exceptional. This Tulane team here this year was really good, too. It's a shame that they had their season interrupted. They looked like they were going to be a special team. What about college baseball? What do you think could have happened? And looking ahead, LSU in particular has just a ton of people coming back next year.
Well, I thought Tulane, as you mentioned, they had a lot of offense, and they had they were kind of turning the page. And it's a season that might have been for them because they hadn't been in the postseason last few years, and it looked like they were a postseason team this year. For LSU, they were actually struggling. When the pandemic hit, they were going to open up on the road at Ole Miss. It was very good, and so a lot of questions around LSU. They were going to go as far as Cole Henry went. He was their ace. He was as good as anybody in the country, really. But he'd had some arm trouble and was actually about to be sat for a couple of days before the pandemic. So who knows what would happen. But that said, they look like the real deal for next year. They've got when you walk in their locker room, they've got grown men. 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8". They got some big dudes. And, I think Paul Maneri's really excited if and when they can get on that field. I know they're in a little bit of a delay right now. They got some players quarantined. They're going to suspend their fall workout for a couple of weeks, but they really like their team next year. And unfortunately, Kenny, I think a lot of people are going to be really good in the SEC because you got transfers, you got those extra years because everybody got an extra year from last year. So it's even though LSU's better, so is everybody else.
Well, it's an insane conference. I mean, when you look at that league, everybody talks about SEC in football, and of course, it's the best league in football, but yet it's, I would, without being disrespectful, it's top-heavy in football. In baseball, it's deeper. I mean, you're talking about 7 or 8 teams that legitimately are top 25, and all of them with a legitimate chance to get to Omaha. That's not a stretch.
No, absolutely. I think it's the hardest conference in any sport. And that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, give me another sport that has a conference that's better than the SEC in baseball. I mean, legitimately, every team deserves to be in the postseason any given year. That never happens, but they probably should deserve to be.
I got to ask you, and I'll let Michael jump in a minute before we let you get away. I got to ask you about your observations about Major League Baseball. I love Major League Baseball. I'm sitting here watching right now while I'm talking. And, I understand the shortened season, but I don't like anything they've done. Nothing with regard to rules. I think the man on second base to start extra innings is prostitution.
It's ridiculous.
Okay? I think it's a joke. It's not the game. I think it's ridiculous to make a pitcher come in and he must face 3 batters unless it ends an inning. That takes away strategy unbelievably, and it takes away matchups, which is a big part of the game. It's why you carry certain people on the team. I think the whole concept of the DH being implemented in the National League is ridiculous only because I think it should be either one way or the other for both leagues. I'm a traditionalist. I prefer the pitcher playing and hitting, but you should have it both ways for both leagues all the time. I just don't like what they're doing to the game, which kind of takes me to Rob Manfred. I'm not a huge fan of what he's done for the game, personally.
Right.
I agree with you, Kenny. I hate the extra inning rule that they've done. It's too drastic. It changes the game that we've loved for over 150 years too much. So I get it if it's Little League baseball and you want to get kids home and on a Saturday night, you don't want to play forever and you're worried about their arms. I get that. But with these added rosters, these additional rosters, these bigger rosters because of COVID, there's no reason that you can't let guys just play extra innings, normally. Now, personally, I don't want to see pitchers hit. I'd rather see the DH in both leagues.
Right.
Let's just have the DH in both leagues and call it a wrap. I mean, who wants to see a guy hit 100 and bunt every time he's got a runner at, second and 2, with 1 out? I mean, I'd rather let's just have the DH and make guys work for it a little more.
I kind of land in that side with you too, Ronnie. But I agree. I mean, they just keep tinkering. Let me ask you a question about you're playing you're juggling a lot of things at once. You talked about hoping to get your schedule in by the end of the year, and we're talking about the sports, and they tinkered with baseball to get it jammed in the way it's happening right now. Somebody said that that you're talking about sports, but I got to tell you what, I'm just listening to you talk, listen to Kenny talk. When we talked about the memories that we had, sports does something for the psyche of a community. And I think more than anything, and sports was the thing that used to bring all people together, and losing that camaraderie there. At what point do people start making some moves saying, hey, it's time to move. It's time to take a chance. It's time to do this. I know you're having to juggle that. I know the coaches we've talked to are juggling that, and it was a back and forth thing. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I think the time is now. I don't think I think it's about in the future. I think people are at a point now where they're ready to get on with it. Deal with the new norm, and social distance the best they can, and wear the mask whenever you guess you can. But at the end of the day, we've got to get on with it. Not only just sports, but life in general, and minimize the risk when we can. But it's sports is a big part of society. I agree with you that it has a lot to do with the mental culture, but the mental psyche, but also in the Louisiana and a lot of states, it's economical. And the Saints not having fans or LSU not having fans, and Friday night football and fans not being in the stands, like that affects economics of schools, restaurants, hotels, cities, taxes, you name it.
These are very unprecedented, difficult times, and obviously it's impacted everybody. I just keep thinking I'm going to go to sleep at night. I'm going to wake up, and it's going to be over with, and we're going to go back to living. But then I get the 17-page memorandum from the LHSAA today about the restrictions and what you can and can't do and how difficult things are, and you can't do a broadcast from a press box and everything else imaginable. And I'm like, nope, it's still 2020, unfortunately.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
I think at some point, Ronnie, before we let you get away, I think at some point when you go to Merriam or Webster's or whatever dictionary source you use, somewhere in there you're going to have an edition that says 2020, and the definition will be vulgarity. Okay?
Overkill.
I agree.
I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. What's next? Oh, don't mention it. There's another storm down by Mexico, and who knows where that's going.
Oh, stop it.
I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those years, but whatever. We have faith. We'll persevere. What can I tell you? Of course, the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, LA Sports Hall of Fame. Check it out on Twitter. Check them out on Facebook. Of course, make sure you visit as well. It's worth it. You'll enjoy it immensely. And always enjoy talking to my friend Ronnie Rantz. Ronnie, thank you for the time, and keep up the great work, and nothing but the best with this year's class. Let's hope it all gets pulled off and pulled off in nice fashion.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Lord bless you, buddy.
You got it.
All right, guys.
That's Ronnie Rantz, Jumbo.
That was fun.
Good pitcher in his own right.
Sure, 93.
Guy that's been a friend for quite some time, and he's done a good job and on several fronts, and continues to do that through the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. Enjoy visiting with him.